You got my 40, homie.
I thought you had $200.
Dude, I want to spend Red's money.
I'm broke.
Give it up, Red.
Come on, Debo, stall him out.
When Friday dropped in 1995, it quickly became a comedy classic, packed with unforgettable one-liners, wild characters, and laugh-out-loud moments. But not every scene made it to theaters without controversy. In fact, there was one uncensored moment that came so close to getting the film banned altogether. What really happened, and why was it almost too much for audiences to see? Let's go back to the mid-1990s, when Ice Cube and DJ Pooh were writing a film that would capture the essence of a single day in the hood. By 1995, Hollywood had already seen several films that showcase life in urban neighborhoods. Movies like Boys and the Hood, 1991, and Menace to Society, 1993, were raw, powerful, and often tragic. They depicted violence, poverty, and systemic injustice in ways that shocked mainstream audiences and gave Black filmmakers a platform to tell authentic stories. But Ice Cube wanted to do something different. Instead of focusing on tragedy, he wanted to show that even in neighborhoods struggling with crime and hardship, there was joy, humor, and everyday life. People still laughed, clowned around, and shared stories on the porch. With that vision, Ice Cube teamed up with DJ Pooh to write Friday, a comedy that would still feel real but give audiences a chance to laugh with, not at, the characters. What they came up with was a story about two friends, Craig and Smokey, who spend a Friday trying to deal with a drug dealer, neighborhood bullies, and family drama, all while sitting on a porch in South Central. The humor was natural, the dialogue was sharp, and the cast brought it all to life. But among the jokes and fun, there were also edgy moments that walked a thin line between comedy and controversy. The heart of Friday was its ability to balance humor with real issues. While Craig and Smokey gave us laughs, the film didn't shy away from showing substance use, gang intimidation, and the tough decisions people face in marginalized communities. That honesty is what gave the film its staying power, but it's also what made censors nervous. One particular scene went much further than the others. According to those involved in the production, this was the moment that nearly cost the film its release. It wasn't just about language or a casual joint being smoked. It was about how directly and unapologetically the scene addressed a taboo issue, mixing humor with raw social commentary in a way that executives feared would cross the line. The studio worried. Would audiences laugh, or would they see it as offensive? Would it spark outrage in the press? Would the movie even make it past the MPAA ratings board without being slapped with an NC-17 rating, which would doom it at the box office? These were real concerns, especially for a low-budget film that couldn't afford much controversy. One of the things that makes Friday 1995 such a timeless classic is how real it feels. The characters don't come off like polished Hollywood stereotypes. They feel like people you could meet on any block in your own neighborhood. And there's a reason for that. What many fans don't know is that a lot of the movie was autobiographical, drawn straight from the real lives of Ice Cube and co-writer DJ Pooh. Take Smokey, for example. Chris Tucker's breakout role is one of the most beloved comedy characters of the decade. He's goofy, he's over the top, and he's always in some kind of trouble. But Smokey wasn't just a random character created for laughs. He was based directly on DJ Pooh himself. Before getting into Hollywood, DJ Pooh had dabbled in selling weed. He wasn't a hardened criminal, but he knew enough about the hustle to bring that energy into Smokey's personality. The constant smoking, the outrageous excuses, and the funny ways Smokey tried to talk his way out of situations all came from DJ Pooh's own past. That's why Smokey feels so real, because he's not just a movie stoner. He was modeled after an actual person who had lived that life. And then, with Chris Tucker's unique comedic timing and nonstop energy, the character came to life in a way nobody could have predicted. Smokey ended up stealing almost every scene he was in, but at the core, his foundation came from DJ Pooh's real-life experiences. Craig's story was also rooted in reality. In the movie, Craig, played by Ice Cube, gets fired from his job for supposedly stealing boxes on his day off. It's one of the most memorable and ridiculous details in the film, and fans often laugh at the absurdity of it. But here's the twist. It was inspired by something that actually happened in Ice Cube's family. Cube revealed that the idea came from his cousin, who was working as a delivery driver for UPS at the time. Somehow, despite not even being on the clock, Cube's cousin was accused of stealing packages and was fired from his job. The unfairness and comedy of that situation stuck with Cube, and he knew it would make the perfect setup for Craig's character in the movie. After all, who hasn't dealt with a boss or a job that treated them unfairly? By pulling from something that really happened, Cube gave Craig's situation a level of relatability that connected with audiences everywhere. That blend of real-life experiences with humor is exactly what made Friday stand out. It wasn't just a bunch of random jokes thrown together. It was a reflection of Ice Cube and DJ Pooh's world, their friends, their families, their frustrations, and their inside jokes. For the people who grew up in similar neighborhoods, watching Friday felt like watching their own lives on screen. For people who didn't grow up that way, it was a chance to peek into a different world that was both funny and humanizing. What many fans never realized is that Chris Tucker was never the first choice to play Smokey in Friday. In fact, co-writer DJ Pooh was originally supposed to take on the role himself. Since the character was partly based on his own past experiences, it made sense for him to step in front of the camera. But the studio, New Line Cinema, had different ideas. They agreed to back the movie financially, but only if someone with more acting experience took on the role. This decision set off a casting search that could have changed the entire vibe of the film. Believe it or not, both Chris Rock and Tommy Davidson were in the mix. Just imagine what Friday might have looked like without Chris Tucker's wild, over-the-top energy and unforgettable delivery of lines that fans still quote today. In the end, Ice Cube and DJ Pooh discovered Tucker through his performances on Def Comedy Jam. His unique comedic timing, high-pitched voice, and non-stop energy made him the perfect choice to bring Smokey to life. And the rest, as they say, is history. Tucker's performance turned the character into an instant fan favorite and cemented Friday as a cultural classic. Much of what made Friday so funny came from Chris Tucker's wild, improvised performance as Smokey. Tucker brought so much energy to the set that many scenes went beyond what was written in the script. His natural timing, facial expressions, and ability to push boundaries turned simple dialogue into unforgettable catchphrases. But that improvisation was also risky. When Tucker leaned into certain jokes, especially those dealing with substance or intimate innuendo, the result was both hilarious and shocking. During one infamous take, the combination of Tucker's delivery and the rawness of the subject matter created a moment that had everyone on set cracking up, but left the studio executives deeply uncomfortable. This was the scene that would cause endless debates between the filmmakers and the studio. Should they cut it entirely? Should they tone it down? Or should they trust the audience to understand that the joke was not glorifying bad behavior, but simply reflecting real-life situations with humor? Ice Cube, as both co-writer and star, wasn't about to let the scene go without a fight. For him, Friday wasn't just a movie. It was a statement about everyday life in Black communities, told with honesty and humor. If they started watering down scenes just because they made people uncomfortable, then the movie would lose the very thing that made it different. Cube argued that audiences were smart enough to get the point. Yes, the scene was edgy. Yes, it might make some people cringe. But it was also real, and it reflected conversations, situations, and moments that actually happened in neighborhoods like the one the film was portraying. Removing it would mean creating a version of Friday that felt fake, and that was the last thing Cube wanted. The filmmakers went back and forth with the studio, negotiating how much they could keep and how much they had to cut. In the end, a slightly toned-down version made it into the final film, but those who worked on set said the uncensored take was even rawer, and it was that version that almost got Friday banned. Looking back now, it's easy to see why the filmmakers fought so hard for it. The scene wasn't just about shock value. It was about pushing boundaries and refusing to sugarcoat the reality of urban life. It showed that comedy could be raw and still meaningful, that laughter could be used to open conversations about serious issues. And for the audience who grew up in neighborhoods like Craig and Smokey's, it felt authentic. It wasn't Hollywood's polished version of the hood. It was the real thing, complete with language, behavior, and humor that only made sense if you'd lived it. That authenticity is what made Friday resonate so deeply and why fans still quote the film nearly 3 decades later. Throughout Friday, Craig, Ice Cube, and Smokey, Chris Tucker, smoke weed, joke around, and find themselves in ridiculous situations. That was expected. What made the film controversial, however, was how unapologetic it was about showing substance use and the ripple effects of it in the community. The uncensored scene in question reportedly pushed this theme to an extreme. In one version, Smokey's antics around smoking crack, not just weed, were played out in such a comedic, exaggerated way that some on set thought it was hilarious. But for the studio, the issue wasn't whether it was funny, it was whether it crossed a line. Crack cocaine was a devastating epidemic in black communities during the late 1980s and early 1990s. Families were torn apart, violence increased, and the media often portrayed these neighborhoods in nothing but negative terms. For a comedy to include even a joke about it was risky. Studio executives worried that audiences wouldn't see the humor. They'd see it as offensive, insensitive, or even exploitative. Had the scene been left uncensored, the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America, might have slapped the film with an NC-17 rating. For context, that rating is a death sentence at the box office. Most theaters refuse to screen NC-17 films, and many TV networks and magazines won't even advertise them. For a low-budget movie like Friday, that would have killed its chances of success. Ice Cube, however, wasn't about to let Hollywood executives sanitize the film into something unrecognizable. For him, Friday was about authenticity. Yes, it was a comedy, but it was also rooted in the reality of life in South Central Los Angeles. People smoked weed. People dealt with drug dealers. And yes, the crack epidemic was part of that environment. To Ice Cube, showing those elements, even in a comedic light, wasn't about glorification. It was about reflection. He wanted audiences to laugh, but he also wanted them to recognize the truth hiding beneath the humor. Comedy, after all, often works best when it's built on uncomfortable truths. That's why he pushed back so hard when the studio insisted that the uncensored scene had to be cut. For him, this wasn't just about one joke. It was about the larger message of the film. If they started stripping away the raw edges, what would be left? Just another watered-down Hollywood version of the hood, instead of the authentic slice of life he set out to portray. Another reason the scene stirred so much debate was Chris Tucker himself. His improvisational style meant that even a scripted joke could take on a new life once he started riffing. What might have been a throwaway moment on paper became electric, risky, and unforgettable on screen. Tucker's energy elevated the humor, but also heightened the controversy. Executives feared that his comedic timing and wild delivery would make audiences laugh at something they shouldn't be laughing at. In their minds, it blurred the line between parody and endorsement. On the flip side, fans later argued that this was exactly what made Tucker so brilliant in Friday. He had the ability to make light of situations that were deadly serious, creating laughter while also hinting at the darker realities lurking behind the jokes. That duality was part of the genius of his performance, and part of why Smokey became one of the most iconic characters in 1990s comedy. Inside the studio, however, panic was brewing. Executives worried that advocacy groups would protest the movie, accusing it of making light of the crack epidemic. They feared the film would be labeled as harmful to the black community rather than uplifting. There were even whispers that the controversy could lead to boycotts, effectively banning the movie from major theaters. The decision came down to a brutal choice: keep the scene and risk killing the film entirely, or cut it and save Friday's chances of release. In the end, the studio insisted on cutting the rawest version. What audiences saw in theaters was a toned-down portrayal that still hinted at the issue but kept it within the safer boundaries of a comedy. Over the years, word of the uncensored scene began to leak out. Cast members, crew, and even Ice Cube himself mentioned in interviews that some of the original takes were much wilder than what ended up in the film. This only fueled fans' curiosity. By the 2000s, Friday had become a cult classic, and rumors about the lost scene became part of its legend. Some fans felt cheated, believing that they never got to see the pure, unfiltered vision the creators had intended. Others argued that the decision to tone it down may have been what allowed Friday to succeed and pave the way for sequels like Next Friday, 2000, and Friday After Next, 2002. Looking back now, the controversy surrounding the uncensored scene seems almost inevitable. Friday was breaking new ground by showing a lighter, more comedic side of life in South Central. But with that innovation came risk. The film challenged Hollywood's narrow view of Black communities, and in doing so, it pushed against the boundaries of what was considered acceptable. Nearly 30 years later, Friday is still quoted daily by Felicia. You got knocked the F*** out, and it's Friday. You ain't got no job, and you ain't got us to do. But beyond the laughs, it endures because it was more than just a comedy. It was a reflection of real life, told through humor, honesty, and love for the community it represented.